Hey everyone, Nubkeks here and welcome to my tier list for the Garrosh patch in Hero League and Team League in Heroes of the Storm, where I'll be telling you what I think are overall going to be the most impactful heroes for each different role in this particular patch. Okay, so a couple of things to mention as we dive into the list here is that overall the meta has definitely changed a little bit since the last time I recorded one of these. The crazy dive meta that we had for a while has definitely been toned down quite a bit. You know, like Malthael was nerfed. We saw Nubkeks nerfed quite a lot as well. Genji has been nerfed. So the very, very heavy dive focus and explosive type of gameplay and team comps that were most effective, that's not there as much anymore. It's definitely been mitigated a lot. And therefore, there's more of a chance of an opportunity for some slower, more sustained damage teams, more focused on kind of map control and winning through sort of strategy, as opposed to kind of just, okay, let's force a team fight really hard. We're going to dive cocoon someone and then just try kill them before they can run away, and we'll win off of that kind of strategy. So here are in tier 1. Oh, I actually forgot to change the text there, but the rest has been updated. So what are the big changes here? Okay, well, first of all, right at the start, I do also need to point out that this tier list, broadly speaking, is for high levels of play. And I'll point out kind of the places where that matters a lot and the places where it doesn't matter a lot. So for example, two big things right here in tier 1 I want to point out immediately. Number one is Genji. I think Genji is incredibly good, but he's an incredibly high skill cap hero. And honestly, probably outside of maybe even Grandmaster, he's going to fall off quite a lot. Unless you're particularly strong with Genji, it's going to fall off quite a lot. And then basically that leads to the scenario where, I mean, if you look at, let's say, Schwimpy from Team Fnatic, absolutely, they're the best team in the world if you don't follow the esports side of things. But absolutely insane on Genji. And Genji, they just give Schwimpy Genji and you guys are going to have a great time if you're Fnatic, right? But then if you look at Hero League, he does typically have an extremely low win rate at this stage. So Genji is very much moving into the Li Ming side of things, where she was very strong for a while. And he was very strong and she was very strong in a very flashy way, which is, even though they may not have been particularly stronger in some cases than other heroes, when they did actually succeed, they did so in a very dramatic way, which made a big impact on what people think of them and how they perceive them. And I suspect Genji's going to be stuck in that same spot as Li Ming, where after repeated nerfs, they actually become quite a weak hero in general, in Hero League and Team League as well. But people still think that they're very, very good. I think, again, with Genji, much like Li Ming is today, Li Ming is incredibly good in professional levels of play or very, very high levels against her Grandmaster level players' hands, but she does fall off quite a bit, again, unless you're particularly strong in Li Ming compared to the level of play you're at. She falls off quite a lot. The standard player at your given level of play, probably not going to be that amazing on, like Li Ming is not going to be the scariest hero they could get. Probably the same thing with Genji, but in the hands of someone extremely skilled on them, they can be insanely strong. I think particularly so Genji, that's why he's still up in tier 1 over here. Flip side of that, we've got the Butcher who's moved up here. So the Butcher changes, got a lot of big changes in this patch. Well, really they changed how his trait works, that's the main thing. So Abattoir is baked in. He now gets meat much faster from killing heroes, but slower from killing minions. So what this means is, of course, he's gonna snowball extremely hard off player kills. Extremely hard off player kills. So I think Butcher's going to be really, really good, actually. I think he's going to be really good. He's not going to be good at professional levels of play, probably, because it's going to be simply so hard to actually get the kills, to get him the meat, and he's countered so easily, it's just not going to work, right? But I think in Hero League, in the sort of just your regular solo queue, even Team League environment, I think Butcher could be very strong. Again, not as strong in higher levels. He does get countered quite easily. But he's your typical, you know, overpowered pub stomp type hero at the moment. Snowballs insanely hard once he gets ahead. And I think Butcher is going to be one to watch out for in a huge way in this particular patch. Other heroes we got in tier 1, so we have Arthas. I've moved Arthas up to tier 1. I feel like he is overall probably the best tank right now. He's got incredible sustained tankiness. He's very good against a lot of melee heroes, a lot of physical damage dealers. So I think Arthas really suits the current meta, especially with the Nubkeks being nerfed down. I would rank him as overall probably the best tank in the game by a very small margin, but I feel like he's going to suit this more sustainy type meta particularly well. Dehaka is up here as well. Again, Dehaka has been nerfed down a lot, but nonetheless, Dehaka, he's a very strong solo laner, and he's a solo laner with a global, so that will always make him, or nearly always make him, extremely strong in Hero League in general. Malthael up as well, who's also been nerfed quite a lot recently, but Malthael again, still a very strong solo laner, still a strong sustained damage dealer, and he's not crazy OP by any means, but I think he's still a very, very strong pick for your solo lane, and he's very good against a number of map objectives as well. Another hero that actually got maybe a change you're not aware of, but a big change, is actually Nazeebo. So recently Nazebo's actually had a bug with his trait that it's not stacking properly. People aren't getting credit where they should be getting credit for those trait stacks. So Nazebo's actually fallen down quite a bit in recent times, but that bug has been resolved now, and I'm expecting a fairly large resurgence of Nazeebo in this particular patch. He's very appropriate to Hero League because games do tend to go fairly long, and Nazeebo just scales so well into the late game. So long as you get to the late game, he's going to be this massive damage dealer. He's pretty tanky for range damage, and he just does so much. He just outputs so much damage. And once you get to level 20, he's insanely strong. So in those Hero League scenarios where people don't really know how to end the game and it tends to go on quite a long time, Nazeebo is just going to flourish. So I think Nazeebo is a really good spot actually at the moment with that bug being resolved, so watch out for him. In terms of supports, I've added Rehgar up here with Uther. So Uther's obviously been toned down a bit. I think Uther's still good. Again though, moving into a more supporty type meta, more sustained type meta, he's not quite as strong as he was before. He's obviously worked better in like the sort of very bursty dive sort of scenario because of his armor that he gives with his heals. Obviously very good at mitigating those dives, or both mitigating the dives against you, or then for empowering your heroes to dive by giving them armor as they dive in. So he worked very well there. He's still very strong, but I don't think he's just straight up the best support in the game, bar none, anymore. I think Rehgar is actually quite comparable. Rehgar just being this really good flexible hero. And again, what I was mentioning, I think map control is going to be a bigger deal right now. Rehgar obviously has a lot of damage. He's got a lot of wave clear. And that adds a lot, I think, to the game at the moment. So I actually consider Rehgar to be really, really strong. And, you know, especially seeing as Uther will typically be the one that's banned, Rehgar stands out as being a particularly strong support at the moment. He's got like nice enough sustained healing. He's got burst healing with Ancestral. He's got his healing totem for, again, sustained healing, and then he's got wave clear. I think he's in a great spot. So I think, hey, if Uther is banned away every game, you're going to be in a great spot grabbing Rehgar nice and early. Sonya is here, and Sonya is still fantastic in the solo lane. That's really all to be said about her. Zeratul, again, to mention him, another hero much like Genji or Li Ming, very, very high skill cap hero. In the hands of a very skilled player, they can be extremely scary and impactful. But again, I wouldn't be too worried unless you're running up against players that are very good at Zeratul. So he's one to keep an eye on, but he's also not as popular as those other heroes. So yeah, I mean, it's Zeratul, you know, he's just really good, but he's very, very difficult to play to his max effectiveness. The final hero then in tier 1, I think one of, even perhaps maybe the strongest overall in some ways, is Zul. I think Zul is incredibly strong right now. Zul is so good. He just brings so much wave clear, so much map control, and since his rework, his team fighting is an awful lot better as well. I think Zul is he's very, very strong, and he'd be one of my top picks on a number of maps, to be honest with you. I think Zul is really good. So he'd be probably my number 1 hero at the moment to be scared of. Otherwise, probably, you know, the Butcher. They'd be kind of the 2 heroes I'd really, really be watching out for in my games at the moment. Moving on to tier 2 then. Again, bear in mind the way I structure the tier list is tier 1 I think are the heroes that you really want to watch out for, that are worth first picking, maybe even banning away. Tier 3 is like they're kind of the average heroes. That's kind of the rough standard. And then tier 2 are heroes I think do something particularly good in the game at the moment. So I've actually fair few heroes in tier 2 right now. So let's go through them pretty quickly, and I'll tell you sort of the main points about each one. So first of all, we got Abathur. Now Abathur's quite map dependent. I don't think the rotation, the meta favors him quite as much right now, but he is still very good. He also synergizes very well with heroes like, well, you know, Jaina, Genji, Greymane. Again, some of those heroes have fallen off a bit, so perhaps not quite as strong. But I do think in the right hands, on the right map, that Abathur can be a very good hero, though he's not quite as good as he has been in the last, let's say, last sort of 2 months or so. Nubkeks, he's still up there, he's still good, but he has been nerfed down. Again, he's got great CC in his base kit. Cocoon is fantastic. He's got, fairly good sustain and tankiness. And Nubkeks is a very good option to be one of your tanks as well. Oriel, another support that does particularly shine. Again, she's very reliant on comboing her with a good energy, a good hope generator. But Oriel she's definitely pretty good. I'd say she's not quite as flexible, obviously, as Uther or Rehgar, but she is up there when she's comboed correctly. And I would also say she's probably a little bit more difficult to play because she's kind of much more unique in some ways than a lot of other supports. So that's something to watch out for. But Oriel can be very good as well. Cassia, still good too. Again, you're usually going to be picking her to counter heavy basic attack teams. She can be a very good answer to that. So, for example, I would say she could be quite good against the Butcher, to give one example there. So Cassia is quite strong, though. Again, she tends to be pretty niche, but she does her niche pretty well. Chromie, Burst Mage, also pretty niche. She's going to be very good against teams that have a support without cleanse in particular. She can blow people up with Temporal Loop. I think that's very effective, incredibly effective in a Hero League scenario. Someone walks out of position, they don't have a cleanse. Great, Temporal Loop them. Getting a pick, particularly later in the game, can just totally swing the momentum of the game, and I think Chromie's very good at that. We've got Diablo, and I think Diablo is a very strong tank. Again, it depends on the maps. He might be a little bit less relevant because I don't think Infernal Shrines, if I'm remembering correctly, is on this rotation. So that will move Diablo down a bit. So I think that's one of his best maps. But on the maps that Diablo is good on, maps with rotations and where ganks are important, where you can farm souls fairly easily, Diablo is extremely strong. It's also not very popular. So if you're good at Diablo, that can be a real big bonus to bring to the game. ETC is up here as well. I like ETC. I think ETC is quite solid, but he is definitely he's more difficult to play than people realize. Definitely a very mobile tank, very much about flanking, setting up CC, displacing, and kind of moving in and out of the fight with self-healing. But I do think he's quite good. I just think it will take a little bit of practice for people to really get used to playing ETC again. We've Falstad, solo laner, ranged solo laner. Ranged hero with a global, great wave clear, decent damage, good control for bosses and things like that with Mighty Gust. Falstad, I think, is in a really nice spot at the moment. I've moved him up just because I think he fits better. I mean, we don't have as many of these crazy divey heroes that have huge blow-up potential, which could have been a bit of a problem for him. So I think he fits a little bit better in the slower damage dealing scenario, and then just the map control that he brings is incredibly valuable. I've moved Greymane down. I haven't been as impressed with Greymane recently. I think Greymane is still a very solid hero. He's still very flexible damage dealer, but I don't think that he's tier 1 at the moment. But he's still very, very good, and he's going to be one of the heroes that you see most frequently just because he's so good in pretty much every scenario. It's hard to go super wrong with Greymane. Certainly he'll struggle a little bit against, let's say, Zul or Arthas, which is something of a problem, when he gets locked down by those melee heroes. Heroes that make it difficult for him to jump into melee range, that is a bit of a problem, and that's part of why he's moved down. We've got Gul'dan, who I think, again, is still very good. Another, I would say, high skill cap hero in terms of positioning and landing good horrifies, but in the right hands can be very, very strong. We've got Jaina. I've actually moved Jaina up. I think Jaina's going to fit with this patch pretty well. I feel like, just her burst damage, her slows, and the kind of anti-melee sort of mage style that lends to her is going to be quite effective in the particular patch where we've got heroes like Butcher and Zul that are going to be in the front lines that she's going to be fairly good against. So I expect Jaina to be actually pretty decent. Johanna, tank with lots of wave clear, and like I said, I think map control is going to be a big deal. You get lots of map control because of the wave clear that Johanna brings, so that's very, very valuable. Plus blinds are quite nice too. Alright, then blasting through some of the other ones. I mean, we've got Kel'Thas, he's pretty much in the same spot he's been. Mage with good AoE damage, and most importantly, a ranged damage dealer with a reliable stun. Leoric, just very reliable solo laner. Lunara, Just very, very sustained range damage. I think she's in a very nice spot at the moment. Got Malf, not as dominant as he was in recent times, but still a good overall healer. We've got Ragnaros. Okay, it's mentioned Ragnaros. So Ragnaros got some fairly substantial changes, buffing up his W and his E builds. And Ragnaros, he's just that hero that refuses to die, really. You know, he got so many massive nerfs to him, absolutely massive nerfs. Yet he's still holding on, being this relevant hero in Hero League and Team League. So I do think he's a good, fairly solid choice. I mean, he's not the best at laning by any means, but Molten Core is really useful. I expect him again to fall off a little bit without Infernal Shrines there, but I think Rag is probably fairly solid, and I think both of his builds, I don't think either one stands out to me yet as being just incredibly dominant, but he's one to keep an eye on as we get more practice in Hero League with the Rag sort of mini rework. We'll find out like what his new builds are like. So yeah, bear in mind that Ragnaros could move up or down a tier depending on how those new builds go. I expect probably still tier 2, but keep an eye on him. I've moved Samuro up a lot in this tier list. You guys been watching like my live streams recently. I've been playing loads of Samuro. We've been doing loads of just playing games as random heroes or letting you guys choose, and I've ended up on Samuro somehow more than any other hero. I don't know, I just have a lot of luck playing, getting stuck on Samuro. But I actually, you know, having played him some more, I actually think he's in a relatively reasonable spot. I feel like in lower leagues, he's just, you know, a good, somewhat mindless hero. You know, you pop your clones and they're just going to run around chopping stuff. People will attack clones by accident. They won't know which is which. It's a bit confusing. And he just has lots of wave clear and he's good at split pushing. So that stuff is obviously very impactful in like the low leagues. I think then in the higher leagues, I actually think he's pretty relevant as well as it's sort of split soaking. Hero, I saw, obviously we had a game against, what was I playing? I was playing Dahaka against Wooby. I think I put that game up on YouTube. But that was very insightful to play against Wooby, who obviously has busted out Samuro and pro play as well, to see, okay, Samuro basically played as a global hero with his mirror images and teleporting between them. And that was very insightful. And I actually think that's very strong at higher levels as well. So yeah, I've actually moved Samuro up a lot in the tier list. I think he's actually fairly decent because of the wave clear he provides and the global soak. And I also think he translates in a somewhat different way into being very strong at lower levels. So yeah, I actually think Samuro is quite good at the moment. There you go. Stitches, great tank, can win games with hooks, and he's got good damage. He got his damage nerfed a little bit, so not as strong as he was, but still pretty strong. We've got Stukov, and I think Stukov is pretty solid actually. Again, one of the big concerns I have about Stukov that might move him down is they have nerfed, or well, changed, but ultimately nerfed his healing indicator. So it's much less clear to your team now when Stukov's heal is on you, which means that it's much more difficult to actually spread it amongst your team. And that's, I think, proving to be a pretty big issue. So we'll see how that goes over the course of the patch, but that could make Stukov much worse just because people don't realize that they need to spread the heal. And then you lose out on loads of potential healing. That could be a big issue. But I think Stukov is quite good, but there is quite an option that he'd move down probably to tier 3. But he's decent enough, and he works pretty well, and it's like a double support sort of situation. But yeah, he's been nerfed down a little bit, and I'm quite concerned about the healing indicator stuff. We got Sylvanas, and I think she's very, very nice. Just a good overall damage dealer, good pusher. She snowballs games with pushing objectives, and I think that makes her very strong in Hero League sort of situation. Got Tastar, moved him down a little bit. I do think he's quite strong, and obviously synergizes very well with Vala, and he's a great hero just to pick up as a second support. Lots of wave clear, good damage, and he does enable heroes like Vala to do even more damage. Lost Vikings on Garden of Terror, enough said. Probably wouldn't be too keen on them on other maps in Hero League and Team League in my experience. But they're obviously insanely strong in Garden of Terror. We've got Tracer. I think Tracer's actually in a pretty good spot at the moment as well. Especially, you know, with Genji maybe falling off a little bit, because Genji's quite good against Tracer. I mean, we can see more and more Tracer. So yeah, I think there's definitely a spot for Tracer at the moment. Tyrande, interesting one here. So yeah, with the sort of small buffs to her, and then this sort of hyper carry Tyrande build where you just play her as an assassin who buffs herself, and she does lots of hero damage throughout the fight with her basic attacks. And yeah, she's turned out to be pretty decent actually. So I don't think she's necessarily amazing, but I think she's very solid. And that's Tyrande, I think a good sort of second support / assassin type option. We've got Fala, very safe and consistent range damage dealer. Varian, I think he's a good solid tank for the most part. I think the meta will suit him a little bit more because he wasn't that great against a dive meta. It's like he's the tank who'll never die, but he's not the best at peeling or protecting for his team. But I think this is going to suit him a little bit better, this current patch. And then we got Zagara, again, she very strong in solo lanes, this ranged solo laner, so that can be very impactful to bring out if you want to win that solo lane. And again, the map control that she can bring is actually very strong as well. All right, moving on, and we're not going to spend much time on the next tiers, but just to point them out, in tier 3, we do have all the heroes that I think they're solid, they're good, but they don't, I feel like they don't shine as much in this particular meta right now, but they're solid picks, and if you get them on a map that's good for them or in a comp that's good for them, they can be very good picks. We've got Garrosh in here. I'm not too sure about Garrosh at the moment. Obviously, one of the big issues with Garrosh is he's supposed to be a main tank. However, he doesn't have a reliable engage, and he doesn't have a reliable escape, which tanks will typically have. I mean, if you look at the main tanks we've had for a long time, I mean, let's say Nubkeks, obviously very reliable, both engages and escapes. ETC and Muradin obviously had like the main tank heydays. You've got Arthas. Arthas is a little bit lacking on those, but he's so survivable that he's not too bad, and his root's pretty decent. I mean, Garrosh is going to have a bit of a harder time. He's also fairly vulnerable to burst. So we shall see with Garrosh. I think he could work very well in like a double tank scenario. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some balance tweaks to him. And I could easily see him climbing up even maybe one day soon, being one of the best tanks in the game. At the moment, I'm not too scared of him in Hero League. He's just going to be there, and he should be fairly okay. I expect him to be stronger in lower levels of play where people walk into his stuff more. I expect him to fall off quite a lot in higher levels where people will kite him more effectively. But I mean, we'll see again as the patch goes on. We've got tier 4 then and tier 5. So I'd say tier 5 are the heroes you'd probably almost never want to pick, right? So we got Gazlo and Raynor. I just think they're so weak in general that there's basically these heroes, there's always going to be a better pick. There's basically almost never a situation where I'm going, yeah, this hero actually is a really solid pick here compared to the other options I have available. So that's the kind of issue there. Then tier 4, these are heroes I feel like are fairly weak overall. I think they can be good, but it's pretty rare that they're going to be a relevant pick. That 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a better pick available. So you've got Cho'Gall, you have Lucio, Murky, Probius Rexar, Sergeant Hammer, Thrall, Valeera, and Zul'jin. Again, they can all be strong heroes in the right situation, but it's just the right situation crops up very rarely. They can be counterpicked quite easily. All that sort of stuff. They're very much maybe heroes. You're not going to see them much, but yeah, there you go. So that is the tier list, guys. We've got tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Give it a thumbs up if you found it helpful. And yeah, good luck with this particular patch in Hero League. I think it's an interesting one. Things haven't shifted too much. Just, again, overall, just fairly consistent nerfs to a lot of the dive explodey type compositions that we had recently, and I think more of a focus on a little bit more sustain in the team fights and map control being more relevant moving forwards. And again, Zul and Butcher for me will be the 2 big heroes to be watching out for in this particular patch. Guys, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you all next time for more Heroes of the Storm. Bye bye.